Well, g'day fishers, welcome back to our weekly fishing report. Well, looks like the weather this weekend is going to be a lot better than last weekend. It certainly Port Stephens copped some rain last weekend. Everywhere else didn't get it except Port Stephens. It's definitely the mecca for rain this year. But anyway, this weekend looks pretty good. Just typical westerlies this weekend. They don't look too strong, up to about 13 knots, 14 knots. Which is comfortable if you're in a bigger boat offshore there, especially if you're going to fish the inshore reefs, catch some snapper and things like that. Inside the bay, you can always find a little bit of protected area, which, up around Salamander Bay, Soldiers Point, you should do all right out of that wind. So let's move into the bay, actually, at the moment. It's a bit of a surprise package in the bay. Speaking to Paul from Fishport Stephens Estuary Charters, he's actually been getting some nice reds in the bay, some good snapper up to that 2 kilo mark. So some really nice reds around inside the bay there. Not sure where he's fishing, but he's doing pretty well there. Pretty cagey on that one, but they're definitely throughout the bay. Even the Rockwall has a few reds around them, so definitely worth a fish there. There's also been a few mac tuna and bonito around inside the bay, chasing bait, especially up in Salamander Bay itself. But they're feeding on very, very small white baits. So don't bother trolling through them. Don't bother casting big stick baits. You want to cast the little armour anchovies, the 5 to 11 grams. I actually like to swap them out to single hooks as well. So if you're a keen fly fisherman like me, definitely worth a shot on the fly rod. I know Ben Hall and John have been out there chasing on the fly rod this week. There's actually some really nice fish up around about that 6 kilo mark. So some really nice mac tuna. And we used to see these mac tuna back in Port Stephens back in the day. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, they used to frequent inside Port Stephens all through the winter months. So it's good to see them back. Bit of tradition there for Nelson Bay. So those that have moved to Port Stephens recently, believe it or not, the mac tuna used to come in the bay every winter. So there you go. And we used to try and chase them on 2 kilo line in the old answer days. So good fun. I wouldn't recommend it these days. But anyway, so mac tuna, bonito, and even tailor inside the bay at the moment. So definitely worth a shot. The Ludrick fishermen are having a ball down on the breakwall. We can't keep up with our weed flies. It's like I'm tying weed flies every 5 seconds inside the shop. But they're definitely working well. If you're finding it hard to get cabbage weed, well, then our weed flies are second best, if not first best. They work really well. So plenty of Luddos down on the breakwall at Nelson Bay and the anchorage wall as well. There's been some nice bream on the anchorage wall and also down here at Nelson Bay. So definitely keen to catch some bream. They'll be along those rock walls at the moment. If you're keen to get the little boat in and chase the bream up around the rock walls, sent a customer up to One Tree Island there at the back of Soldiers Point. He cleaned up on the bream, just slow rolling hard bodies, the little divers. Did really well on some really nice fish, some fish over 40 centimetres. So some good bream moving in those rock walls at the moment. So that'd be the pick of the choice inside the bay this weekend if it was me. Moving on to the beaches and rocks, plenty of really good bream and some really, really nice tailor up on the beaches at the moment. So some really big tailor around. John actually sent me some photos of some crackers he's been spinning up in the washes. Fish above 2 kilos and they're absolute horses. So definitely worth a shot spinning up some tailor at the moment. All the beaches seem to be holding tailor. The usual, the Spit at Fingal, back down to Samurai 1 mile, some nice gutters at 1 mile at the moment actually. And then back down on Barooby Beach when it's open. It should be at the moment if National Parks doesn't change their mind every 5 seconds. So just check with National Parks website to see if the beach is open, but it should be. And like I said, plenty of bream on those beaches as well. And the salmon are starting to turn up in numbers. They're good fun. A lot of people don't rate them, but I reckon they're a good sport fish. And they're a bit of fun in the winter, that's for sure. Now on the rocks, there's been some really nice drummer around on the rocks at the moment. So just remember your bag limit on drummer. I've done some research on drummer recently. Believe it or not, they're probably one of the oldest fish you can catch from the rocks. Some of those drummer that are 2 to 3 kilos are actually 30 years old. So just be wary when you're killing those drummer that they're such an old fish, and probably release a few. Just keep a couple for a feed. So plenty of drummer around at the moment. So definitely worth a shot. Plenty of Luddos around. So if you're going to go down and fish down off Barooby there's plenty of Ludrick down that way as well, so especially off Cemetery Point, and a few nice tailor off the rocks there. A couple of longtails caught this week and a couple not caught. Still those whaler problems at the moment off the rocks. A few guys are getting sharked on those bigger longtails, but it's good to see they're still around. And the water, believe it or not, is around about that 20, 21 degree mark, so still good enough for longtails. And like I said before, I think in the fishing reports, I've caught them all the way through to August, so there you go. Now on the offshore scene, a little bit patchy this week, only because of the weather. There's been some really nice snapper about though. Guys that have managed to get out in those westerlies have actually caught some really nice reds in the shallows. Now we're off the back of the full moon. I think it'll fire up. I had a quick go myself with Shane. We fished Little Island late yesterday afternoon and caught some nice fish up around the 3 kilo mark, all on plastics. The gulps did pretty well there. You can see our gulp wall is getting demolished, so there are a few snapper around at the moment, and also the bait junkies as well did pretty well. So some nice reds around there. Still a few trag on the reefs, even though the water is cooling. It's still, like I said, that 20-21 degrees, so definitely worth a shot at a few trag. Also, there's been some good kings around, especially at Broughton. I weighed a really nice fish, 11 kilos. Customer also got busted off a few times, so he was live baiting live slimies and managed to find some good kings. It'd be worth, if the weather's good, having a trek out Allmark Mountain there. There's been some really nice kings out that way, and this time of year you get a few John Dory out that way as well. If you get some little live yakkers and drop them down, you'll get a mixed bag, and including those John Dory out in that deeper water, which are always a good feed. Looking at the water out on the shelf, it looks pretty good. There might be yellowfin there. The altimetry doesn't seem the best, but it could be worth a shot. I definitely reckon there'll be a striped marlin there. The water's about 22 to 22 and a half on the edge of the shelf, which is pretty good for this time of year. But there's a little bit of current that's pushing east to west. So if that hits the edge of the shelf, the bait usually stacks up and you usually get a striped marlin, which usually happens in March, April, not this time of year. But if you're keen, if you want to burn the fuel, I reckon it'd be worth looking at a striped marlin out on the edge, most definitely. But anyway, that's it. Looks like a pretty good weekend for winter this weekend. I would definitely get out there and give it a crack. Anyway, we'll speak to you next week.